Bitcoin is a commodity. How would you classify some of the other cryptocurrencies? CNBC's Bob Pisani is in Washington sitting down with the man who regulates it all, CFTC Chair Chris Giancarlo. Bob, take it away.
Thanks very much, Melissa. Mr. Giancarlo, thanks very much for joining us. Fast Money viewers love hearing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. You're the man in charge of regulating that, but there's a lot of questions about regulation. There was a roundtable last week held in Washington to look at better ways to protect consumers from crypto fraud and to regulate cryptos more effectively. What do you need to do to make sure the crypto market is regulated so that average Americans can invest in it?
Thanks, Bob. It's great to be with you.
Thank you.
And we're very focused on the fraud and manipulation aspects of cryptocurrency markets right now. And in fact, last week, we just won a big victory in a federal court in Boston, certifying our authority to prosecute fraud and manipulation in the crypto space. We've been very active at it.
Do you worry that if the U.S. futures, the U.S. does not do more to innovate, that the crypto innovation is going to go overseas? This is a complaint that the crypto bulls constantly push against us. The U.S. has got to go ahead with this or it's going to go offshore.
And yet, it's the United States that's gone forward with the very first Bitcoin derivatives, with Bitcoin futures trading on the CME and also Bitcoin options and Bitcoin clearing. We're ahead of the world in that. So there's no question that the United States is leading in a number of areas, but there's other areas as well of innovation where I think it makes sense for us to take a little bit more of a thoughtful and intelligent approach, just as the U.S. Congress did 20 years ago in the early days of the Internet.
You know, viewers constantly ask me about the difference between the CFTC, for example, and the SEC. Now, we know, of course, that Bitcoin is a commodity. You regulate that as the CFTC, but Bitcoin ETFs are a security.
Yes.
And the SEC regulates that. Now, the SEC has been very reticent to agree to a Bitcoin ETF, and yet we have Bitcoin futures trading. Can you briefly explain? It looks to viewers like it's safe to trade Bitcoin futures, but wait, it's not safe to have a Bitcoin ETF. How do you explain that disparity?
Yeah, well, you know, we're old agencies. Our statutes were written in the 1930s. So we're operating off a 30-year piece of, you might call it software, we're trying to repurpose for a new innovation that didn't exist when these statutes were written. More broadly, the SEC, their oversight is over capital formation markets with a big retail focus. At the CFTC, our focus is on risk transfer markets, and we've always focused on derivatives. And a lot of that is institutional trading. So we're focused on institutional investment. They're focused on retail. Different orientation, different history. So we do come at these things from different perspectives.
So where do we go from here? Where do you see the Bitcoin market evolving? Go out your crystal ball 2 years from now. What do you see happening?
Well, so 2 years. I personally think that cryptocurrencies are here to stay. I think there is there's a future for them. I'm not sure they ever come to rival the dollar or other hard currencies, but there's a whole section of the world that really is hungry for functioning currencies that they can't find in their local currencies. There's 140 countries in the world. Every one of them has a currency. Probably 2/3 of them are not worth the polymer or the paper they're written on, and those parts of the world rely on hard currencies. Bitcoin may solve some of the problems, whether it's Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency. But we're talking not 2 years. We're talking maybe 10 years down the road.
How do you push that innovation? You're sounding like an innovative guy. How do you push that innovation and protect mom and pop out there from getting ripped off? We know it's a problem. We know custody's a problem. We know fraud's a problem.
Yeah. So it's this two-handed approach. On one hand, we're real strong and hard against fraud and manipulation. On the other hand, we're innovative and thoughtful when it comes to innovation. And just this very week, we're kicking off our very first, and the very first for any U.S. government agency, FinTech conference here in Washington.
Before I let you go, I got to ask about another hot topic, marijuana, pot stocks. Marijuana is becoming legal. It's not fully legal in the United States, of course,
right,
but it's becoming legal. Could you foresee the day when the CFTC might approve a marijuana futures trading contract?
I could foresee the day. It would rely on, just as you said, working our way through the legality of marijuana. But as a legal product, I could absolutely see something based upon a marijuana as a derivative product.
Now, that will be something we will cover, I can assure you.
I look forward to it.
Will you come back and explain more about what you're doing?
Indeed.
The viewers are really interested in what you have to say about this.
Thank you, Bob.
Chris Giancarlo, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Chris Giancarlo is the chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Melissa, back to you.
All right, Bob Pisani, lots to unpack there. But first of all, I want to touch on this the notion of a marijuana contract. This seems to imply that all marijuana is created equal, and that's really not the case when it comes to particularly medicinal versus recreational use marijuana?
Yeah, and again, sorry to do this, but let's call it cannabis, and ultimately, you can't have a commodity based upon the underlying plant. I mean, there's just, to me, and the whole story behind cannabis is that this is not about necessarily the plant that sells as a commodity. This is about all the derivative usage and all the medical, and yes, recreationally, but it's the same thing. Do we have an alcohol, contract? I mean, ultimately, that's
corn,
really where
we
we're
have
at.
soybeans, we have crude. I mean, just to play devil's advocate, isn't that the same?
It's not. It's not, because again, it's really about the derivative products. And I would go right back to if the recreational side of cannabis is a substitution for what's going on in the food and the alcohol world. Are we dealing with the CFTC there? I don't think we would be. And I think it's ultimately about brands. It's ultimately about the products that are going to be created from this, the lifestyle, the opportunities. And
it is interesting, though, when you look at a Bitcoin, because we're talking about the two of them overlaid. It's interesting when you look at a Bitcoin chart and then you overlay it with a Tilray or a Canopy or a Kronos. It's sort of a similar buyer that's out there, has nothing to do with each other, but yet guys are looking for outer limits of the risk spectrum, and it seems like there's an inverse correlation.
Less than liquid markets with a lot of retail investors and a parabolic move. Any chart looks the same, I don't think you're doing this, Steve. But yeah, I think they're totally different.
Totally different.
In terms of stocks, so real quick, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Listen, Bitcoin probably doesn't even make a dent in their revenues, but you have some optionality if, in fact, one day it is big. And you look at it, I think August contracts were up 18% over July. So the growth in CME continues to be there. Valuation is a concern. They report the end of October. But Chicago Mercantile Exchange, within a whisper of its all-time high, I think continues to go higher here.
If there's a Bitcoin ETF, Karen, do you think that would be a catalyst for Bitcoin?
Definitely. I do. I mean, I think there's so much money that just says, I got to wait till this is a little further along in its evolution of being a tradable security.